Hurricane Michael has been strengthened into a Category 4 storm early on Wednesday, just hours before it is expected to plow into Florida's Gulf Shore with towering waves and roof-shredding winds. At 7 a.m. local time, the center of the hurricane was bearing down on a stretch of the Florida Panhandle, about 105 miles south-southwest of Panama City, and moving relatively fast at 13 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds extending 185 miles from the center are already lashing the coast, the National Hurricane Center, NHC, said. More than 375,000 people in 22 counties are under evacuation orders and advisories as Michael is expected to become one of the Florida Panhandle's worst hurricanes in living memory. Hurricane Michael is set to make landfall on Florida's Panhandle or Florida's Big Bend, where it potentially could unleash devastating waves as high as 13 feet, the NHC warned. Fears remain that some people failed to heed the calls to get out of Michael's way as the storm began speeding north over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It is projected to make landfall later on Wednesday. Meteorologists said it had the potential to become one of the worst storms in the history of the region. Ryan Ma of WeatherModels.com said, "I guess it's the worst case scenario. I don't think anyone would have experienced this in the Panhandle." Share this article. Share this is going to have structure damaging winds along the coast and hurricane force winds inland. It comes as a satellite image of Michael took the terrifying shape of a skull as it roared closer to the Florida Panhandle as a fierce Category 4 storm. The sinister-looking red and gray skull appeared briefly on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration infrared satellite images. The University of Georgia's Marshall Shepard, a former president of the American Meteorological Society, called it a life-altering event on Facebook and said he watched the storm's growth on satellite images with growing alarm. Florida Governor Rick Scott called Michael a monstrous hurricane with a devastating potential from high winds, storm surge and heavy rains, prompting President Trump to declare Florida a state of emergency. Hurricane Michael will be here tonight. This is your last chance to get prepared for this monstrous and deadly storm. The state is not taking the storm lightly and neither should any family, Scott warned. Scott warned that people in potentially affected areas should not take any chances against such a large storm, adding that no one's going to survive such a wall of water. "I cannot emphasize enough. Hurricane Michael is forecast to be the most destructive storm to hit the Florida Panhandle in decades. It will be life-threatening and extremely dangerous. You cannot hide from the storm. You can rebuild your home, you cannot rebuild your life," he said. "I understand that evacuations are inconvenient, but this storm will bring torrential rain and heavy wind, along with dangerous storm surge throughout the Panhandle. If you have been told to leave, you need to go. It could be the difference between life and death." The hurricane has started affecting flights in Florida, with multiple airports announcing they will be closing ahead of the storm making landfall. Airports in Pensacola and Destin Fort Walton Beach will shut down from midnight and flights out of Panama City Beach and Tallahassee are already being canceled. The National Hurricane Center is predicting Michael to make landfall somewhere over the Florida Panhandle or Florida Big Bend area on Wednesday. The center warned residents along more than 300 miles of coastline, from the Alabama-Florida border to the Suwannee River in Florida, to brace for hurricane conditions. As much as 1 foot of rain was also forecast across Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. The destructive force on the storm's outer bands were felt out at sea on Monday night as passengers on board the Royal Caribbean's Empress of the Seas filmed the ship being tossed around by strong winds. Footage posted on Twitter by Snapper Tams showed the cruise ship caught up in the storm southwest of Isla de la Juventud in Cuba. He tweeted that the storm heavily delayed their arrival into Havana because the ship was forced to sit for several hours waiting for it to move through the Yucatan Channel. The Florida governor declared a state of emergency in 35 counties along the Panhandle and Florida's Big Bend regions. About 2,500 National Guard soldiers were assisting, and Florida Highway Patrol made nearly 350 troopers available for deployment. State offices, schools and universities were closed through the end of the week in Panhandle counties. Scott also warned caregivers at North Florida hospitals and nursing homes to do all possible to assure the safety of the elderly and infirm. Lines at gasoline stations grew as people left, and tolls were waived in a bid to encourage evacuations. Residents who opted to stay emptied grocery store shelves of water and other supplies. President Trump said he had been updated on the hurricane, adding, "We are very well prepared for the incoming hurricane. FEMA is ready. We're all ready." He said the storm was much bigger than earlier anticipated, but said, "Hopefully we'll get lucky, but maybe that won't happen." Escambia County Sheriff David Morgan bluntly advised residents choosing to ride it out that first responders won't be able to reach them while Michael smashes into the coast. If you decide to stay in your home and a tree falls on your house, or the storm surge catches you and you're now calling for help, there's no one that can respond to help you, Morgan said at a news conference. In the small Panhandle city of Apalachicola, Mayor Van Johnson Sr. said the 2,300 residents were frantically preparing for what could be a strike unlike any seen there in decades. Many filled sandbags and boarded up homes and lined up to buy gas and groceries before leaving town. "We're looking at a significant storm with significant impact, possibly greater than I've seen in my 59 years of life," Johnson said of his city on the shore of Apalachicola Bay, which where about 90% of Florida's oysters are harvested. There will be no shelters open in Wakulla County, the sheriff's office warned on Facebook, because they are rated safe only for hurricanes with top sustained winds below 111 miles per hour. With Michael's winds projected to be even stronger, residents were urged to evacuate inland. "This storm has the potential to be a historic storm. Please take heed," the sheriff's office said in the Post. In Gulf County alone, the first to begin ordering residents of low-lying areas to higher ground, mandatory evacuation notices encompassed an estimated 3,800 homes, said Jessica Sasich of the county's Emergency Operations Center. Many are located in the coastal town of Port St. Joe, the county's largest municipality, lying directly in the hurricane's projected path, she said. Georgia Governor Nathan Deal declared a state of emergency in 92 counties on Tuesday morning. In neighboring Alabama, Governor Kay Ivey declared an emergency for the entire state on Monday in anticipation of wind damage, heavy rains and power outages. North Carolina's governor said he was afraid Hurricane Michael could slow the recovery for homeowners dealing with winter flooding from Hurricane Florence. Governor Roy Cooper said Tuesday that Michael isn't expected to hit his state as hard as Florence did last month, but people shouldn't let their guard down, even if they're suffering from cleanup fatigue. He said many houses that suffered roof damage in Florence are still covered in tarps and could be vulnerable to strong wind and